and welcome. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. I'm Laura Cellier, and these are the headlines. President Trump set to watch a film of the October 7th Hamas atrocities ahead of his meeting with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Jerusalem pizza bomber Ahlam Tamimi ordered to leave Jordan ahead of King Abdullah's meeting at the White House. And Syria's president continues his tour of Saudi Arabia, while back home violence worsens between Kurdish and Turkish-backed forces. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet with President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff in Washington, D.C. The two are discussing the second phase of the ceasefire deal with Hamas. Netanyahu's office has just said that he will be staying over the weekend in Washington following many requests for meetings from other US officials. Well, 79 hostages still remain in Gaza, all except Shiri Bibas and her two young sons are men. Netanyahu will meet with President Trump tomorrow for talks on a broader plan for the Middle East, which includes Gaza, Iran and Saudi Arabia. More in this report.
Talks on the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire kick off on Monday, 16 days after the truce began. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington, meeting with U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. Witkoff will later consult with Egyptian and Qatari mediators. But the future of the deal between Israel and Hamas may depend on Netanyahu's Tuesday meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House.
The discussions on the Middle East with Israel and various and sundry other countries are progressing. Bibi Netanyahu is coming on Tuesday. And I think we have some very big meetings scheduled.
Reports say Netanyahu agreed on the first phase of the ceasefire under pressure from Witkoff. Now, some Israeli negotiators and hostage families worry he may resist moving to the next phase as he fights for political survival. The second phase is meant to lead to a permanent ceasefire, a full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners. But the Israeli government opposes ending the war as long as Hamas remains in power. Some officials believe Netanyahu hopes to convince Trump to back continued military action until Hamas is fully defeated. Before leaving for Washington, Netanyahu was supposed to meet with his negotiating team, but he canceled the meeting and decided not to send a delegation to Qatar. For now, all eyes are on Netanyahu's meeting with Trump, as the fate of the ceasefire, and those still held in captivity in Gaza, remains uncertain.
Well, for more on that now, let's go down to Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where we find our correspondent now, Balir Sledin. And Balir, Trump's envoy Witkoff has made it clear, hasn't he? He is very keen for the second phase of this deal to go ahead. Netanyahu, on the other hand, must take into consideration some political pressure as well. We have heard from a series of Israeli politicians on that throughout the day, haven't we?
Yes, we've heard from Bezalel Smotrich saying that this can't come on the expense of the Israeli security interest, which is if the Saudis want to normalize with Israel, but Israel, on the other hand, needs to give some guarantees that the Palestinian state will be in this area at any sort, according to Smotrich, then this is going to hurt the Israeli security interest, and that cannot be happening. And of course, if that's not going to happen, then maybe the Saudis will not normalize relations with Israel. And of course, it's all depending on what's going to happen also in Gaza, because as long as Hamas stays in power in Gaza and hold hostages, they will have the say, let's call it, in any future plans that the Trump administration has. Now, you've mentioned Witkoff and his plan to continue to the second phase of the deal, but we've heard also from other Trump officials or Trump administration's officials that they are also insisting that Hamas won't be governing Gaza in the future. Now, these things contradict each other at some level, and that's why this meeting is very important today, because maybe we didn't hear, or actually we cannot comprehend what exactly the plan that the Trump administration is having in their minds in regards to Gaza, because on one hand they want the deal to continue to the second phase and the third phase and bring back all the hostages. But again, they are saying that we won't see Hamas governing Gaza in the future. Hamas will not simply be convinced to completely disarm and, of course, leave Gaza after this war. Now, another thing is happening is a change in dynamics and many aspects in regards to the negotiations that formally starts today. Now, after appointing Minister Dermer, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, to head of the negotiations instead of the head of the Mossad, Deri Barnea, Netanyahu is now considering, and that's what we are learning from Israeli media, to remove actually Shin Bet chief, the Shabak chief, Ronen Bar, from the team entirely. Bar will be replaced, according to the report, by another senior Shin Bet official who will operate under Minister Dermer. Adding to that, of course, the fact that the Americans are planning to somehow take more of a leading role in these negotiations, the shuttle diplomacy that we've been talking about throughout the past week. So maybe the new negotiation for the second phase of the deal will be a bit different than what we were seeing over the past year or so of the negotiations for the deal.
Balia, thank you very much indeed. Balia Sladin there down in Tel Aviv. Well, with me in the studio this hour, our correspondent Nicole Zedek. Nicole, thank you for being with us. A lot of questions surrounding the conversation between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Steve Witkoff. They haven't yet sat down together, it would appear. We are getting into the mid-morning hours in Washington, but there are so many questions on there. Will the second phase of the deal go ahead, of course? Will Israel get some kind of deal with the Saudis? What about Iran? A lot still to talk about on the table.
A lot still to talk about, and this is why, at least right now, the Prime Minister's office says that this trip needs to be expanded until Saturday evening, so that Netanyahu actually will not be here on Saturday. That means for the next phase of the releases for the hostages, when we are expecting 3 more men to come home on Saturday. But he says that these meetings inside the United States, being the first foreign leader to meet with Trump, this is crucial right now, because as you just mentioned, there are so many aspects of the different region that do need to be discussed, but the top priority right now is this hostage release deal and ceasefire. And by starting off those negotiations for phase 2, this is day 16. That's where we are right now, as far as Monday, February 3rd, day 16 of this ceasefire. And this is when discussions for phase 2 needed to start. And so these discussions starting between Netanyahu and Steve Witkoff, it's interesting because especially people here in Israel, they are praising Witkoff, not only the Trump administration, but Witkoff specifically for his role, for not only going to Hostages Square and seeing the family members in Israel, as we saw the last batch of releases, for going to Gaza, seeing firsthand how the Palestinians in Gaza are reacting to this news and seeing exactly what it's going to take to possibly rebuild and reestablish Gaza when it comes to phase 2. No one in the previous administration had done that and taken on the role that Witkoff is. And so when it comes to actually implementing phase 2, if you do have a man that has met with the Qataris, has met with the Egyptians, who's been inside Israel, who's been inside Gaza, it does seem that the likelihood of pushing ahead with phase 2 coming from a man with this and this incentive.
He's invested, isn't he?
He's
very invested,
and so is the Trump administration.
And it's interesting to hear, Nicole, that Witkoff reportedly was the one to persuade Donald Trump to watch the video of the Hamas atrocities from October 7th, because he himself has seen it and was deeply affected by it.
He watched it while he was here.
Yeah, exactly. So if Trump will be watching that before he meets with Netanyahu tomorrow, that could affect his whole take on the process as well.
Absolutely. It's important to know that this will be one of the first times that President Trump will be watching just this horrific video from the October 7th massacres and why this all started in the first place. And already President Trump has had a strong stance against making sure Hamas has no sort of a rule inside Gaza for the day after. But especially watching something like this, I do believe it will reaffirm his stance and his determination into making sure that this deal goes through and to making sure that Israel's security is not faltered by any sort of a deal also. So that'll be interesting to see exactly his reaction after watching that video.
Right, and his commitment to make sure Hamas is no longer in control of the Gaza Strip on the day after. That is the big question.
The most complicated aspect when it comes to phase 2. How do you remove Hamas, which is the only power inside the Gaza Strip, or at least maintains the majority of the power over the other Palestinian factions, even as long as they are still there with no incentive to leave, even if they're losing military control, they are still the governing body right now. And so how do you persuade them? well, this is what's expected to come in these phase 2 negotiations, but that's the main question right now.
Right, Nicole, for now, thank you very much. Nicole Zedek there. Well, the 3 hostages who were freed from Hamas captivity in Gaza on Saturday are still receiving medical treatment here in Israel. And one of those now freed hostages, Keith Siegel, his family is due to give an update on his condition a bit later on. Ofer Calderon and Yarden Bibas are at the Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv, where we now find our Joe Brown. Joe, any updates on the men's condition this hour?
Well, as you mentioned, Keith Siegel's family will be giving a statement in around about 20 minutes. This statement will include some words from his wife, Aviva Siegel. She was abducted on October the 7th and released as part of the November 2023 ceasefire deal. From what we know so far regarding Keith's health, we know that he is in a stable condition, but he's lost a considerable amount of weight. And that's similar to a majority of the hostages, 18 of whom have been released thus far. But also today giving a statement will be the family of Yarden Bibas. And bear in mind that he, even though he's come back to Israel and he is starting his recovery just like the fellow former captives, he still has a lot more to deal with. He still doesn't know what's happened to the rest of his family, his wife Shiri and his 2 young children, Ariel and Kfir. He was told in captivity that they were killed by an IDF strike. Israel is yet to verify that, but the Hamas terrorists taunted him with this and with information about his family. We will hear from some members of his family later on today, so that will give a slightly wider perspective on his current state, both mentally and physically. Although in terms of the mental side of things, if you saw the pictures that were released upon his release, then you will see sort of a sadness and a distress in his eyes. But the family of Ofer Calderon actually spoke last night here at Sheba Hospital. It was a very emotionally charged press conference from his brother, who has said in the past that he had suicidal thoughts as a result of his brother's captivity. He gave an empowered message in which him and also his wife, that's Ofer's sister-in-law, thanked Emmanuel Macron and the French government for their help and support, which received a considerable amount of backlash, especially from those on the French right, who said that Macron hasn't done enough to help Israel and that they are thanking the wrong people. However, the Calderons have stuck by their words. Of course, Ofer Calderon is a French-Israeli dual citizen. And also here at Sheba Hospital is Arbel Yehud, who we haven't heard a great deal from, other than the fact that she was held in solitary confinement for 482 days and only saw the first person who was Israeli and who wasn't one of her captors once she was released, which was Gadi Moses. So we don't know a great deal about her state right now. The lack of videos and imagery of her reuniting with her family that we've seen with a lot of the other people, that might give a slight indication as to her well-being. But for everyone who's been released, the 13 Israelis who are part of the Phase 1 framework, as well as the 5 Thai workers who were released separately through negotiations with the Thai government and the mediators of Hamas, all of them will have a very long road to recovery.
Joe, thank you very much. Joe Brown reporting there. And just a couple of updates on the upcoming meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you, Joe. Between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump's Middle East envoy, Stephen Witkoff. We are now hearing that that meeting will not happen until the evening, Washington time, so still a few hours away. There's also been some comment from Hamas, which says it is ready for talks on the second stage of the Gaza deal and is asking mediators to ensure that Israel doesn't stall on the negotiations. So that's where we are with those talks at the moment. But 2 men who are not on the list of hostages set to be freed in this first phase of the ceasefire deal may be released following a separate agreement between Hamas and Russia. A Hamas delegation is in Moscow today. Alexander Trufanov and Maxim Herkin are both men of military age, but they do hold dual citizenship. Hamas says that prioritising their release would be a gesture recognising Russia's stance on the Palestinian issue. Well, to talk more about that and the broader situation in the Middle East, we're joined by Ariel Cohen. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the founder of International Market Analysis as well. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. So let's start with what is happening in Moscow today. Do you think Hamas has worked out a separate deal with Russia?
Probably yes. Russia feels kind of funny because the French get credit. You saw the Calderon family mentioned Macron, and of course the United States is involved. And Russia said, "What are we, chopped liver? We have our citizens." Well, the bottom line is the Russians didn't care about their citizens. They did very little to release the hostages, and they were very supportive of Hamas throughout this ordeal and before that, because Russia recognizes the Muslim Brotherhood, the greater Islamist global jihadi organization, as a terrorist organization, but they do not recognize Hamas. The Russians also worked with Hezbollah. There was a lot of Russian weapons found in Hezbollah's arsenals. And what I want to talk about is the two axes that are working against Israel. One is the global axis of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea that is trying to push the United States out of the Middle East. This is a consistent Soviet and Russian policy for decades. I have documented, statements by the then Foreign Minister Yevgeny Primakov and the Iranian Foreign Minister Velayati from the 1990s when they're talking about that. Now, the smaller anti-Israel axis is Russia, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and until recently Syria. That was the resistance axis that supported Israeli enemies. And my concern is to what extent Turkey will play games now that they have an inordinate influence in Syria.
Well, how do you tie that in with those comments we had from Turkey yesterday, then saying they are willing to take some of the Hamas Palestinian prisoners who are being released in this phase of the deal? Do you think Turkey is stepping up to be a bigger player in all of this?
Turkey fashions itself as the neo-Ottoman, as an Ottoman Empire player in the Middle East. It competes with Israel, but it also competes with Iran. It has a relationship with Russia, a working relationship, but it also recognizes the illegality of the Russian occupation of the Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, where I'm from, and where Turkey or the Ottoman Empire was the hegemon in the southern part of Ukraine up to the 18th century, and the competition between Russia and Turkey is ongoing for centuries. So we have these long games that great powers play, and Israel needs to navigate very carefully how we protect our security and keep our people safe.
Well, do you think that the Israeli government has pursued the right policy when it comes to Russia then? We saw there was a certain level of cooperation, wasn't there, with regard to Syria. That no longer applies, given that Russia has been incrementally pushed out of Syria. But what should the policy be now between Israel and Russia, do you think?
It's a very calibrated policy. The main challenge for Israel now is to secure herself from the Iranian nuclear arsenal, from the Iranian nuclear program. And for that, Bibi Netanyahu is in Washington today talking to President Trump. There's a lot of pressure on Trump not to take out the Iranian nuclear program. There are a lot of isolationists coming to high positions in the Trump administration. So the struggle is going to be how Israel, the United States, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others are working together to neutralize the greatest challenge for the Middle East, not just for Israel, but for the Sunni Arab states and for the United States and the West in general. How do we defang this axis of evil, axis of resistance, call it whatever you want, and deliver a blow to the Russian and Chinese designs to dominate the Middle East? And for that, we need to take out the Iranian nuclear program.
All right, Ariel Cohen, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Well, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are also expected to discuss the situation in Lebanon. A ceasefire is due to expire on February 18th after Israel requested it be extended due to the failure of the Lebanese armed forces to disarm Hezbollah. The IDF remains active in southern Lebanon, recently demolishing several Hezbollah weapons depots. To talk more about that, we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi. She's the founder and president of the Alma Research and Education Centre. Thanks for being with us, Sarit. So, I mean, clearly the IDF still has a lot of work to do in southern Lebanon. Will it be done by February 18th? If not, what happens next?
No, of course not. Nobody knows what happened next. I just want to make it clear. IDF is operating in very small areas of South Lebanon, in very few areas that it's still present in South Lebanon next to the border. There are areas that were already evacuated by the IDF, and there are areas where IDF didn't maneuver between the border and the Litani River. Large areas. Most of the area between the border and the Litani River are areas that IDF have never maneuvered and only operated there against Hezbollah with airstrikes. What you saw in the past week were mostly airstrikes outside of the area we are talking about, the UN area of operation, trying, as you said, to prevent the smuggling and the establishing of weapon caches in those areas, whether south or north to the Litani River.
Sarit, is Hezbollah taking advantage of the ceasefire to regroup and rearm?
Yes, clearly, if there is there are IDF attacks, so clearly this is an indication for Hezbollah trying to rearm with all the difficulties. And I want to emphasize it, Hezbollah is not rearming at the scale it would want to because of what happened in Syria and, of course, what we had done in Lebanon. The industry of smuggling weapons through Syria and the industry of manufacturing weapons in Syria doesn't exist anymore. And today, it's like drops of smuggling that IDF has to stop. And as I've said, weapons that was never neutralized in those areas. The problem lies with what the government would do, what the Lebanese government would do, what the Lebanese armed forces would do. And until now, they failed to deliver. I'm sorry to say that. I wish this was not the case, but they failed to deliver. They failed to stop Hezbollah military operatives wearing civilian clothing with civilians, creating provocations down south, starting the campaign of rebuilding the villages. This is going to take a long time because the damages are huge all over South Lebanon. They have difficulties in this campaign with regard to the money flow, but at the same time, they are working a lot with PR and they are publishing everything that they are doing, including mapping the damages, working very hard already with connections with construction companies and with Jihad al-Bina, which is another foundation under Hezbollah that is responsible for the rebuilding militarily and civilian infrastructures of Hezbollah in South Lebanon. All of that is already happening while the Lebanese armed forces is starting to deploy in South Lebanon. Lebanese armed forces also has challenges because they have to deploy also on the border with Syria, again, to stop the smuggling from there and to make sure that there is no infiltration of jihadi players from Syria into Lebanon. All of that together pose a lot of challenges to the question, what will happen in February 18?
All right, Sarit, thank you very much indeed. Sarit Zahavi there from the Alma Centre.
Thank you.
Now, since taking office a fortnight ago, President Trump has embarked on a massive government makeover, firing and sidelining hundreds of civil servants in his first steps towards downsizing bureaucracy. This includes the freezing of funds to USAID, the world's largest single donor of humanitarian aid. More in this report.
In what is being described as a purge by U.S. media, President Donald Trump's more assertive stance on foreign policy has begun to show with the upending of the United States International Development Agency, where large amounts of humanitarian aid have been frozen. Amid the chaos, U.S. aid's websites were offline over the weekend, as the Trump administration moves to put it under state control.
It's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
USAID is an independent government agency that provides humanitarian aid to foreign countries. Receiving billions a year in funding, the agency's efforts are addressed towards hunger, poverty, and disease. Trump ordered a 90-day freeze to foreign aid last week to give the administration time to review which of the thousands of humanitarian development and security programs will keep getting money from the U.S. Billionaire Elon Musk, who is leading the push to reduce the size of the federal government, stated that efforts are in progress to close U.S. aid entirely. Among some exceptions to the freeze was assistance of military aid to Egypt and Israel, the latter receiving around $22 billion in U.S. funding since war erupted on October 7, 2023. But the sudden halt in funding was a surprise to many, including a refugee camp in Syria with a population of around 40,000 Islamic State sympathizers, where the Bluemont NGO was especially hard hit.
Bluemont was responsible for everything, from sanitary, gas, and heating, to food and paperwork and archive. So, we were troubled when Bluemont suspended its activities in this short period.
Following criticism that the aid freeze would threaten lives, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced additional exceptions to the freeze earlier this week, allowing aid that provides life-saving medicine, medical services, food, and shelter to continue.
Well, time for us to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be hearing from the family of one of the 3 hostages who was released on Saturday. That's Keith Siegel, the first American citizen to be freed under this part of the deal. His family will give an update on his condition shortly. Stay with us.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Welcome back. There's been further fierce fighting in the Palestinian city of Jenin this Monday. The IDF says it's killed some 50 terrorists during a 2-week operation focused on Jenin. It's carried out controlled explosions, destroying some 20 buildings, while UN officials claim around 20,000 of the city's residents have had to flee the fighting. Well, with me in the studio this hour, our Nicole Zedek. Nicole, things are certainly not calming down in Jenin. The IDF well into an operation there, and as we're seeing, many civilians are having to flee the fighting. The Palestinian Authority, of course, is supposed to be on top of security there. Clearly, they can't cope.
This was what they had been trying to do back in December during also weeks-long operations inside Jenin. The Palestinian Authority trying to crack down on that terror. That didn't work. Now the IDF going in and seeing this large-scale counterterrorism operation. As you mentioned, already 50 terrorists have been eliminated. This is now day 14, so 2 weeks of this operation so far. More than 100 terrorists have been detained. And these IDF forces, they're going building to building, scanning these different buildings, finding large weapons caches, different improvised explosive devices. These are the devices, the bombs that many of these different armed terrorists plant in the roads to then try and detonate when IDF troops then drive over them. So the IDF working and going through all of these houses, trying to crack down on it. But you mentioned not only the mayor of Jenin stating 15,000 Palestinians have fled Jenin so far, but also I want to clear up some different reports as well. The governor of Tubas said that Israeli forces had ordered evacuations for 15 buildings in Tamun and Al-Farah. They told residents not to return for 3 weeks. That was coming from the governor of Tubas. However, IDF officials telling the I-24 News, some sources, that is not true at all. They have not issued any evacuation orders in this area. Any of those evacuation orders, and not even going door to door, dropping leaflets like we've seen in Gaza. This is not the case in the West Bank so far. What we see in the West Bank is really these precise pinpoint operations, troops going in and out. That's at least what we saw in the past and what we've seen so far, but that could be changing perhaps as well, because these troops that are operating inside the West Bank right now, these are the same troops that have also operated in Gaza and in Lebanon, and they're taking those lessons that they learned there and now applying them to the West Bank as well.
Yeah, they're saying they're going to use new weaponry, new technology, new tactics and strategy there as well. Nicole, thank you very much. Well, the family of the terrorist behind the 2001 Sparrow Pizza bombing in Jerusalem has confirmed she has been ordered to leave Jordan. Ahlam Tamimi murdered 16 people, including 2 Americans. She's lived free in Jordan for over a decade, hosts a TV show, and regularly boasts about how she murdered Israeli children. This order comes days before Jordan's King Abdullah meets with President Trump at the White House. Our Lynn Plachmeyer has this report.
Jordanian authorities are planning to extradite a woman who was convicted of planting a bomb in 2001 that killed 16 people and injured 130 in Jerusalem pizza parlor Sbarro. Ahlam Tamimi was convicted in an Israeli court but was released in 2011 as part of a deal which saw the release of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who was held in Gaza for 5 years in exchange for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
I say to Israel, suffer in silence, and in spite of them, we were set free. I thank God that I'm with my family. My feelings can't be translated. All the dictionaries in the world can't translate my feelings.
After her release, she was granted refuge in Jordan, but in 2017, the US announced it was pursuing her extradition due to efforts made by the family of Israeli-American Malki Roth, who was killed in the bombing when she was only 15 years old. Ahlam Tamimi's husband, Nizar Tamimi, posted a statement on Facebook earlier on Monday, confirming that Jordanian authorities have informed her and Hamas that she must leave the country, but adding that she is legally protected from deportation by a constitutional principle and a final court ruling. This news comes as US President Donald Trump is set to meet Jordanian King Abdullah on February 11 at the White House, as tensions between the two countries have risen ever since Trump, not once, but thrice, said that both Jordan and Egypt should accept the relocation of Gazans into their territories. And so, with the Middle East trying to bring back a sense of stability amid the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, this move by the Jordanians might be viewed as an olive branch to the new power in the White House.
Well, Arnold Roth, the father of one of the victims of the Sparrow Pizza bombing, will be live on I24 News with Benita Levin in around an hour's time. Don't miss that. But let me now welcome to the studio Yaakov Lapin. He's the host of the Lapin Assessment on Patreon. He's also a military and strategic affairs analyst at the Miriam Institute and the Jewish News Syndicate as well. Thank you for joining us, Yaakov. Tamimi is one of the most notorious terrorists. She carried out one of the most notorious terrorist attacks, of course, in Jerusalem. She was freed under the deal to free Gilad Shalit. It appears, perhaps, that President Trump has put some pressure on Jordan to extradite her. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's a coincidence that Trump is the second Trump administration comes into power, begins a maximum pressure campaign on the whole of the Middle East. And Tamimi, this awful terrorist who has a bounty on her head, an American bounty on her head, is now being expelled from Jordan, which is a U.S. ally. I think that the dots are pretty clear here. This is probably the beginning of a whole series of pressure campaigns by Washington that's going to be affecting both Jordan and Egypt in different ways. I'm sure that that's very much linked to American pressure, absolutely.
Jordan is under a great deal of pressure right now, as is Egypt, following Trump's call for both of those countries to take in civilians from Gaza. Do you think that that it's part of that as well?
I think that that pressure is certainly underway, and we've heard reports that meetings are being scheduled with King Abdullah and President Sisi of Egypt. But I don't think that they're going to go along with these demands for the reason that they will view them as existential threats to their domestic legitimacy in their own countries and to legitimacy in the Arab world as a whole. I have great doubt that they will go along with these plans of accepting large numbers of Gazans. And in general, I think that President Trump is probably going to find out that the art of the deal can only go so far in the Middle East when we're talking about these kinds of legitimacy, existential red lines, as well as jihadists like Hamas.
All right, Yaakov, for now, thank you very much. Let me bring in Jordanian political analyst now, Bashar Jarrah. Good to have you with us, Bashar. Welcome. Is the order for Tamimi to leave Jordan linked to King Abdullah's visit to Washington?
I believe there was a discussion about this 1 year at least ago when the U.S. ambassador appointed to Jordan was during her nomination in the Senate. Ted Cruz raised the issue of Ahlam Tamimi specifically, and this has been always the case, and always the Jordanian answer from a formal standpoint or official standpoint, that it is a judiciary matter, especially after the Supreme Court in Jordan kind of penciled and solidified the decision taken by another court discussing the status of Ahlam Tamimi. There is no any kind of arrangement between America and Jordan to exchange criminals. For that reason, apart from the political discussion around Ahlam Tamimi and her role in the terrorist attack, apart from that, it is still a legal issue. Now, the whole issue was surfaced on timeline, Jordanian timeline, Palestinian and Israeli, when a rumor started the whole story, and then there were lots of reports. None of them is official so far. However, Islamists and pro-Hamas, pro-Ikhwan Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan are orchestrating kind of a narrative saying that Jordan is yielding to Trump's pressure, which is, in a way or another, not true at all, because there are so many things at stake now between Jordan and America, and it has nothing to do with specifically this case, despite of its political significance.
First of all, why did Jordan agree to take Tamimi in the first place, and why has she?
Is a Jordanian.
Right, but okay, fair enough. But why has she been able to, have such a high-profile role in Jordan? Jordan is an American ally. She did murder Americans. She's had a TV show. She openly boasts about what she did. I mean, why did Jordan think that was a good idea?
Laura, to be honest with you, and I believe this is no secret at all, some people would abuse their status, legal status, especially when it comes to nationality and citizenship. And with that comes a kind of responsibilities and otherwise rights. And both of them should be playing in a very kind of legitimate way. However, especially with people who have this duality in belonging to political entities. In her case, Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood. It is, yes, problematic. And I believe there are regulations to deal with that. Sometimes, under the umbrella of democracy and diversity and letting everyone express themselves, you will be hearing slogans and programs that not necessarily at all welcomed by any Jordanian government. Because as you mentioned correctly, Jordan is an ally not only to the United States, Jordan is a part, and King Abdullah in person is a part of leading the fight against terror. And this is the kind of international commitment. And for that reason, yes, there is sincerity.
President Trump is giving all of America's allies a pretty hard time right now, from Canada to Denmark. Are you confident that Abdullah will be able to win him and Israel? Do you think King Abdullah will be able to win Trump over to the Jordanian point of view?
I believe there are so many things that both Jordan and America find themselves, aligned and very, very kind of steady towards the mission. The mission is to bring peace and stability to the region. The mission is to make Jordan first and America first in any country in the region to fulfill its aspirations without undermining the stability of another country. For that reason, when pressure comes to a matter like Tamimi issue, it's different from what was discussed when you discussed with Yaakov before this interview about pressures exerted against Jordan and Egypt, because this is something non-starter. You cannot have at all any kind of legitimacy to having people, hundreds of thousands of people moved from Gaza because of a war launched by Iran, by Hamas. And you can't, let your best allies like Egypt and Jordan in the war on terror to pay a price that could undermine its stability. This is something different from the issue of Tamimi or any other case related to dealing with terror and how to counter terror.
Okay, Bashar, we appreciate it. Thank you very much, Bashar Jarrah there.
Thank you, Laura.
And Yaakov Lapin's with me in the studio. And Yaakov, just going back to the upcoming talks between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump and his envoy, Steve Witkoff. Yep. I mean, you've heard Israeli politicians throughout the day, most importantly of which is Bezalel Smotrich, who's part of the coalition, talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia and just how much of a price Israel is willing to pay in order to get that. You get a sense that is going to be very much involved in the upcoming negotiations, that Trump has a plan and Israel might have to pay some kind of price for that.
I think that the Trump administration and certainly President Trump have some sort of vision of normalization, a Saudi-Israeli normalization. But, the unanswered question is how Gaza is going to fit into all of that, because it's all very nice to have visions, but at the end of the day, we still have thousands of armed Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip, and this war is unfinished. And there is no deal that can be reached, no matter how well-intentioned, between Washington and Riyadh and Jerusalem, that's going to magically make these terrorist threats disappear.
Right, and to be clear, Israel says thousands of Hamas terrorists must leave Gaza. They can no longer be in control of Gaza, right?
Or disarm, which they're not going to do. And so, the only way that I can see personally for some sort of grand arrangement to take shape...
Sorry to interrupt you,
sure.
Yaakov, hold that thought. We're going to go down to Tel Aviv, where the family of Keith Siegel are giving an update on his condition now.
After 484 days of pain, my beloved husband, Keith, is finally back in my arms. The relief I feel is incredible, yet, as I hold him close, my thoughts are with the 79 families who are still waiting for their loved ones to return. All of our hearts remain broken until every single one of them is home. When I was released from captivity, I made a promise to Keith and to myself that I would keep fighting until I see him again. And I did. I fought with everything I had. Today, this reunion was made possible thanks to President Trump. Your brave actions have brought Keith back to us. From my bottom of my heart, thank you. But the journey isn't over, Mr. President. You are our hope for those that are still in captivity. Our hope rests with you to make sure the next stage happens until all the hostages return home. I know you will make sure that this mission continues until every hostage is returned to their family. The world watches, and we believe in your leadership to end the suffering. I want to thank the government of Israel for making the brave decision to bring the hostages home. The hardest part is ahead of us, and I trust you to see this deal through because it's the road of healing for all of us. The people in Israel have been my hope and kept me above water even in the darkest times. I will always be grateful for everything you've done. My family and I have traveled the globe, knocking on every door, sharing our story with everyone who will listen. We never stopped believing Keith will come home. The support from people around the world, the praise, your messages, your strong stand with us kept us going. Now, I ask you to give the same love to the 79 still waiting. They need us. They need you. Until they are all home, our mission isn't completed. Reflecting on my own captivity, the darkness, the fear, the unknown, I remember the hope that kept me alive. Keith went through almost 16 months of nightmare. Keith is finally home, and now we can both start to heal together. While my family is united, I stand here for those that are still separated from their loved ones. We must not rest. We must not turn away. The 79 hostages remaining in Gaza deserve better. Until they are back, our work isn't done. Together we show that even in the darkest times, there is light. Our fight does not end here until they're all home. None of us can truly be at peace. Thank you, everyone.
That was Aviva Siegel. They're giving an update on her husband, Keith Siegel, who was released from Hamas captivity on Saturday. And as you heard, Aviva herself was a hostage for several weeks before being released in the first ceasefire deal with Hamas back in November 2023. Aviva there thanking President Trump directly for making the hostage deal happen. She also thanked the Israeli government and said no one can rest until all 79 hostages are home. Yaakov Lapin's with me in the studio, and that is what is on everyone's minds right now, the 79 hostages, and if they will be brought home in the next few phases of this deal.
Right. So, I mean, it looks like this phase is going to be seen through to the end because, you know, both Hamas and Israel have very clear and obviously contrasting interests to see that through. But the question marks surrounding the next phase are really big. And as long as they remain question marks and no clear answers, we may start seeing fractures appear and grow bigger and bigger until the whole thing crumples. And I guess this is one of the main things that Netanyahu and Trump are now discussing. What will phase 2 look like? And I think that, you know, the idea that what's left of Hamas can be dealt with in a non-military way, at least in the first stage that would follow this part of the truce.
You don't think they have been weakened enough for that to happen at this point? You think they're still strong to continue fighting and continue controlling Gaza and preventing anyone else from taking over? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think that, look, if this turns into a long-term truce, they will rebuild. They're currently a very badly weakened animal. They've lost 20,000 of their terror operatives, most of their rockets, et cetera, et cetera. They're very badly wounded, and images of gunmen in Gaza are designed to hide that. But if they're given time, they will absolutely rebuild, and that is their intention. And if they rebuild, that will create great doubt about the viability of the Israeli South. And there is no way to deal with that threat other than military means. Any diplomatic attempt to deal with this, and history has shown us this time and time again, to allow them to build back will be very, very negative for our long-term security. So I think any attempt to bypass the need to return to Gaza militarily is going to be unrealistic.
All right. Jakob, thank you very much.
Sure.
Syria's new self-appointed president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, continues his tour of Saudi Arabia. Al-Sharaa dressed in traditional Muslim garments today to visit the holy city of Mecca. Saudi Arabia was his first foreign trip, and he has been in talks with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about reconstruction and rebuilding in Syria. Well, meanwhile, in Syria, the US-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Defence Forces have denied responsibility for a car bombing in the city of Manbij in the north of the country. 14 female agriculture workers were killed when their vehicle was targeted. The city has been the scene of fierce fighting between the SDF and Turkish-backed forces. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Badarkhan Ahmad, who is in northeast Syria for us now. Badarkhan, what exactly happened in Manbij and who is responsible for this attack?
Well, we cannot decide who's responsible for the attack, but according to Syrian Democratic Forces statements, that the part who get benefit from this type of attacks is could be Turkey and the factions backed by Turkey, because now if we look to the media, there is a big propaganda that is leading by some sides that they want to make like kind of tension between the Kurdish society in the northeast and then the Arab society, specifically in places like Raqqa, Tabqa, and Manbij. Manbij majority was the Arab people, and there were also many Kurdish families living there. So after the Turkish backed...
Can I just ask about the victims, were they Kurdish or were they Arab citizens of Syria?
No, they were workers. They were agriculture women workers. Normally in this time of the year, they are going to do some type of harvest. So when their car was passing by the car bomb, then the explosion happened, and then around 14 women, in addition, one man get killed in this attack. And according to SDF statement, they have shown that they are ready to collaborate with the new government, and could be also with the parts that who want to investigate in this attack, which means that SDF have some information about who did this type of terrorist attack, while have a big experience in their fight against the terrorism, specifically in Northeast, and also Manbij was a place that Syrian Democratic Forces managed to liberate it from ISIS with the help of the international coalition.
And clearly, Badarkhan, the situation in this part of Syria is getting worse. The violence continues. What is the status of negotiations between the SDF and the new leadership in Damascus?
Mm-hmm. Till now, according to what we follow, that the negotiations are still going on. Yesterday, we have seen that the Associated Press have met the leader of SDF, or General Mazloum Abdeh. He was his first statement after al-Sharaa announced that he is going to be the president of Syria. So the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the General Mazloum Abdeh, have said that Syria has to be a non-central country and cannot and has to be also through a national meeting, that all the minorities, all the society, specifically the Kurdish people, have to be in the decisions for decide who's going to be the president. So I think the negotiations are still going on, but we get some news that a few days ago, some like checkpoints near Homs, they have arrested some Kurdish family or some Kurdish members for political reasons. This type of actions or news, this puts the people, and specifically the Kurdish society, in a big worry for the future. They are worried now for have the same scenario what they have seen before from Al-Assad family in Syria for more than 40, 50 years of controlling Syria.
All right, Badikan, thank you very much. Badikan Ahmad reporting there from Syria. And just a reminder of our top story this hour, we are waiting for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to sit down to talks with President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, in Washington, D.C. The Prime Minister says he has now extended his visit until the weekend amid calls for meetings with many American officials. We will keep you updated on all of that. And in tonight's rundown, Vanessa Levin will be speaking to the father of one of the victims of the Sabara pizza restaurant bombing back in 2001, amid news that the terrorist behind that attack, Alaa Tamimi, is to be deported from Jordan, that just a few days ahead of a visit to the United States by Jordan's King Abdullah. All of that coming up next. Stay with us. This is i24 News. Good night.
Started on October 7th, but for many, the horror may never end. With homes destroyed, families displaced, hostages missing, soldiers fallen, and a country traumatized. In the first year alone, more than 17,000 Israelis have been wounded, and hundreds of thousands have experienced psychological trauma and need support now. Thankfully, for 112 years, Hadassah hospitals have been on the ground healing. At our expanding Gandel Rehabilitation Center, we're providing critical physical therapy and life-changing mental health services.
Hadassah is a great place.
Today I'm really thankful.
Now, some are back home, living their lives, but many more still need our help. Help your family and friends heal at Hadassah hospitals. Give today.
This innovative tool is the Fat Freezer Platinum, the first home-use fat reduction device that freezes away stubborn fat.
Like most people, I always believed that diet and exercise would be enough to reduce stubborn fat.
The Fat Freezer Platinum uses technology to freeze away stubborn fat from the comfort of your own home. To optimize results, the Fat Freezer Platinum uses TheraLight. The Fat Freezer Platinum will help you sculpt your body in exactly the way you want and keep it that way. It's safe, simple to use, and bottom line is, it really works. The Fat Freezer uses a medically known technology called cryolipolysis, used in high-end clinics all across the globe.
Benjamin Netanyahu is holding major meetings in Washington discussing the next phase of the ceasefire deal ahead of his face-to-face meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday to discuss what the Middle East could look like in the future. We go live to D.C. It's a major turnaround. Jordan reportedly tells Hamas it plans to deport a woman convicted of planning a 2001 suicide bombing in Jerusalem, in which 16 people were killed in a pizza parlor. We speak to the father of one of the victims of the Sparrow terror blast about what this could mean for his fight for justice. And we take you to an Israeli hospital for updates on the condition of some of the freed hostages after surviving nearly 16 months in terror captivity. This is the rundown on I24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Negotiations on the second phase of the ceasefire hostage deal begin today. Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington to discuss the next stage of the agreement with the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, just a short while ago, confirmation that the Israeli leader's visit to D.C. is now being extended until the weekend. Some Israeli negotiators and families of some of the hostages held in Gaza are worried that the Prime Minister may try to derail the talks so the war against Hamas can resume. 79 hostages remain in terror captivity, 3 of whom are set to be freed this Saturday as part of the first phase of the deal. Hamas will confirm who is on the list on Friday. More in this report by our Yulia Pobogailova.
Talks on the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire kick off on Monday, 16 days after the truce began. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington, meeting with U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. Witkoff will later consult with Egyptian and Qatari mediators. But the future of the deal between Israel and Hamas may depend on Netanyahu's Tuesday meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House.
The discussions on the Middle East with Israel and various and sundry other countries are progressing. Bibi Netanyahu is coming on Tuesday. And I think we have some very big meetings scheduled.
Reports say Netanyahu agreed on the first phase of the ceasefire under pressure from Witkoff. Now, some Israeli negotiators and hostage families worry he may resist moving to the next phase as he fights for political survival. The second phase is meant to lead to a permanent ceasefire, a full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners. But the Israeli government opposes ending the war as long as Hamas remains in power. Some officials believe Netanyahu hopes to convince Trump to back continued military action until Hamas is fully defeated. Before leaving for Washington, Netanyahu was supposed to meet with his negotiating team, but he canceled the meeting and decided not to send a delegation to Qatar. For now, all eyes are on Netanyahu's meeting with Trump, as the fate of the ceasefire, and those still held in captivity in Gaza, remains uncertain.
So now let's go live to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He's at the U.S. State Department in Washington. So Donald Trump says talks on the Middle East are progressing, referring to some big meetings with the Israeli Prime Minister. This will be the U.S. president's first meeting with a foreign leader in the White House since the start of his second term. Lots at stake. What is the latest, Mike?
Not surprising at all, Benita, that this would be the first election, not only given the U.S.-Israel alliance, but of course the enormity of the situation unfolding in the Middle East, the Trump administration's prior involvement in it in its first term. And it's a success so far, at least from the Trump administration standpoint, in forcing a ceasefire and hostage release deal thus far. So lots on the agenda for tomorrow in the Oval Office between Netanyahu and Trump. Trump, chief among them, how to move forward here with the ceasefire. The Trump administration, as it had originally structured the deal, intended, at least in the terms of the agreement, for a fuller Israeli withdrawal from Gaza militarily in exchange for more hostages being released, in exchange for more Palestinian security prisoners being released. It appears that Netanyahu will try to convince Trump to tweak that deal of sorts, and instead of a full Israeli military withdrawal in phase 2 of the deal, instead to continue along the lines of phase 1. More hostages coming out, more Palestinian security prisoners being released in exchange for that, and keep it going here as long as they can, essentially, until all the hostages are free. Of course, the big obstacle to doing that is Hamas, because they say, listen, if we keep going along that line, well, Israel will simply come back in and restart the war after all the hostages are released. So certainly a major obstacle to overcome there, and obviously it's politically infeasible at this point in time for Netanyahu to withdraw the Israeli military. He'll lose the right flank of his coalition. The left spectrum of Israeli politics say they'll be there as a safety net, but there's only a safety net that it will only carry Netanyahu so far in terms of that safety net. So now Trump, Netanyahu, and Steve Witkoff, who Netanyahu will meet with later on today at Blair House across from the White House, will try to figure out a way here to thread that needle and move forward this ceasefire arrangement beyond phase 1. But of course, talks will extend beyond that. Saudi-Israeli normalization, which was a priority for Trump in his first term in the White House, now back on the table, trying to figure out exactly where the Saudis lie on this issue, whether they need to see a Palestinian state formed before normalization or whether they will go back to their previous pre-October 7 posture, in that they need to see an avenue to a Palestinian state in order to achieve normalization. And of course, the Iranian issue is always front and center. It looks like Trump is backing off his previous posture on Iran and trying to maybe forge a deal going forward. Netanyahu will probably try to talk him out of that notion and maybe get a little bit more hard-line rhetoric coming out of a White House that seems to be much more adverse to getting entangled in foreign policy objectives than they were the first time around.
Many watching to see what this all means for Israeli-Saudi normalization and, of course, the Iranian nuclear threat as well. At the same time, Donald Trump has been doubling down on this idea to relocate Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Jordan and Egypt. Leaders there may not have liked the idea, to put it mildly, but the U.S. leader seems to think they will go with it. What are you learning? What is the latest?
Well, as I mentioned, it's no surprise that Netanyahu is the first leader. It's not really a surprise either that King Abdullah of Jordan is going to be the second leader to visit the White House. He'll be here in D.C. next week to talk with Trump, and certainly that relocation plan of Trump will be tops amongst the list here, as Abdullah feels it will just lead to massive instability in Jordan if suddenly Gazans are being imported into Jordan here per the Trump plan, along with Egypt. Trump, this is his MO, and we saw it earlier today. It's unrelated to the Middle East, but related in the conversation we're having now. The deal that Trump reached with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Remember, Trump was threatening 25% tariffs across the board on Mexican imports. Suddenly they talk. Now Sheinbaum is she's going to send 10,000 Mexican troops to the border to try to fend off border crossers, to try to fend off fentanyl being sent across the border. Now Trump's saying, well, now we have an arrangement. We're going to hold off on those tariffs for a month. This is how Trump goes at his policy. He throws out big demands, has talks. Those demands kind of get whittled down. Everybody wins, supposedly. This may be what Trump has in store for Abdullah, maybe in store for Sisi as well. Throw out those big demands right at the beginning, try to extract concessions, save face all around. So the big plan to send 2 million Gazans elsewhere, that could certainly be whittled down after next week.
An interesting strategy. Indeed, we will be watching. Thank you so much for now. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim at the U.S. State Department in Washington. And now for more, we welcome to studio Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers and the former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF, and our correspondent, Nicole Zedek. Thank you both so much for being here in studio. Much to discuss. I want to start, Eitan, with your take on phase 2 of the deal. There is so much at stake. the heart of the nation, waiting for more hostages to come home safely. Huge risks involved as well. Your sense?
First of all, I think you're right. The most of the nation is supporting and waiting to see those who are alive coming back. And as we are making it, taking more time, the timetable will be long in the discussions. There is two obstacles that has to be emphasized. First of all, if you are able to cut and to short the timetable for the stage 2 or the second shift of arrival of hostages, you have to do it, in my opinion, in something like 2 to 3 weeks. Secondly, there is another, I think, threat, if you can call it, for cutting the process that is running now. Because if you start now the discussions, and will be some obstacles that the other side will identify that is bringing it like to cross a mines, I mean that Hamas can use it as a obstacle to stop what they should do now until finish the first 33 people to have to be arrested. And we're talking about 20 more that should come back home.
To be freed.
Eight of them probably are dead, as we see. So it's a lot of tense. What is bothering me is the fact that the Prime Minister is going to change the delegation that are discussing and developing this kind of opportunity. And why? I have nothing to say about putting Ron Dermer as the head of the delegation,
right,
because you have to look and enlarge skills. But the fact that there is a rumors that the head of Shabak should be replaced and the others, it means that the Israeli delegation that has the experience for the first stage and creating the identification and to realize who is the weak point and the bad point, you are going to change them. It means that we are going down on the way that when we finish the first agreement. So when you connected everything, it is on the shoulder of the Prime Minister to decide if I'm going to the second stage, as we are wishing for, by supporting by the majority of the Israeli nation, you should make it immediately, rapidly, and to try to make the second opportunity much more shorter to bring all of them back home.
Meanwhile, Nicole, much concern about what this all means down the line. And as we heard from Mike, a lot of focus on Donald Trump and what he might say in the meetings tomorrow. We also are learning in a report that he will be watching a documentary of the October 7th atrocities before he meets with Benjamin Netanyahu. One might have hoped he'd already seen the documentary. Nonetheless, we know he would have been briefed. What do you make of it?
This is a documentary that U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff just watched recently during his trip to Israel. And after watching it, he said he was shocked by the atrocities that Hamas not only committed, but then filmed themselves. These videos that here in Israel, unfortunately, many people have already seen, these GoPro videos from October 7th, 2023, showing the atrocities. And so for someone like Steve Witkoff to now watch those videos, who has then spoken to the released hostages who were just welcomed home from the hospital, gone to Hostages Square, seen the plight of the Israeli public, to then tell President Trump, you need to see this video if you're going to continue with these negotiations. I think that's a very powerful message coming from the Trump administration, who's now been not only to Israel, but also to Gaza. This is where Steve Witkoff has been. So when you're looking at the mediators that are now involved in these negotiations, specifically Witkoff here in Israel is being praised for not only meeting with all of those family members of the released hostages that I've spoken about, but also meeting with the Qatari officials, the Egyptian officials, and going into Gaza and meeting with Gazans on the ground and seeing the destruction. If you're talking about rebuilding in phase 2, this is something that we had not seen from the Biden administration, from Blinken, who was also involved in these talks. And so that does give him a little bit more legitimacy, people say, when talking about phase 2, when it specifically comes to Gaza. And so by taking all of the different sources and information that he learned during his trip here, now going back to the United States and passing that over to Trump, that's going to make the meeting now between Trump and Netanyahu also a little bit more powerful and possibly more impactful as well.
Stay with us. We've got more to discuss right now, though. We're going to go to correspondent Balir Sladin. He joins us from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And we know the families of the hostages are urging Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu not to let this deal fall apart before all hostages are freed from terror captivity. What is the latest, Balir? What can you tell us?
Yes, we just actually moved from in front of the offices of the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, where hundreds of people, including relatives of hostages that are not included, unfortunately, in this phase of the deal, that are included only in the second phase of the deal, and the supporters and calling for the continuation of this deal into the second phase of it and the third phase of it in order to bring back all the hostages. We've heard there the brother of Eden Alexander, who is a young man that is, of course, not included in the first phase of the deal. He said that, come stand by us, this can't stop until the last hostage is back. We support the Prime Minister and the government to continue with the deal. We will not let this deal collapse. We've also heard from Ofer's relative. Ofer is the hostage that came back just last Saturday among the three that came back from Hamas's captivity. She was there as well, and she said that although they are, of course, very happy to see their relative come back and be with his family, but their heart is not complete until all the hostages are back. So this is what we are hearing from the Israeli public and the supporters of the families of the hostages. They want this deal to continue. They don't want anything to make it fall apart.
Talking of exactly that, what more are you learning about the Israeli negotiating team hoping to ensure exactly that all the hostages get to come back home?
Yes, so after what we have heard about the change from the American side, the so-called shuttle diplomacy that the Americans are planning to take, and the role that Steve Witkoff is planning to take in the negotiations for the second phase of the deal. And now we're learning that after appointing Minister Ron Dermer, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, very close to Netanyahu and also close to the Republican Party in general in the U.S., to the chief of the negotiations from the Israeli side, we are now learning from Israeli media that Netanyahu is actually considering removing Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar from the team, entirely removing him. They had a meeting about that. It wasn't an easy meeting, as I'm hearing, and Bar will be actually replaced by another senior Shin Bet official who will operate under Minister Dermer. So we see that the dynamics will actually change in this negotiation cycle, and that means that Netanyahu is planning to change the approach that the Israelis have taken before. Maybe it's because also the Americans are planning to change their approach as well.
Correspondent Balir Sladin, live from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for that update. On to another major development, and it's a major turnaround. Jordan has reportedly told Hamas it plans to deport a woman convicted of planning a suicide bombing in Jerusalem more than 2 decades ago, in which 16 people were killed in a pizza parlor. It's a move that could bring a long-delayed measure of justice to families of the victims of the Sparrow terror attack. Ahlam Tamimi was convicted in an Israeli court of orchestrating the blast in August 2001, but was released in the 2011 deal for kidnapped soldier Gilad Shalit. She quickly found safe harbor in Jordan. More in this report.
Jordanian authorities are planning to extradite a woman who was convicted of planting a bomb in 2001 that killed 16 people and injured 130 in Jerusalem pizza parlor Sbarro. Ahlam Tamimi was convicted in an Israeli court but was released in 2011 as part of a deal which saw the release of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, who was held in Gaza for 5 years in exchange for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
I say to Israel, suffer in silence, and in spite of them, we were set free. I thank God that I'm with my family. My feelings can't be translated. All the dictionaries in the world can't translate my feelings.
After her release, she was granted refuge in Jordan, but in 2017, the US announced it was pursuing her extradition due to efforts made by the family of Israeli-American Malki Roth, who was killed in the bombing when she was only 15 years old. Ahlam Tamimi's husband, Nizar Tamimi, posted a statement on Facebook earlier on Monday, confirming that Jordanian authorities have informed her and Hamas that she must leave the country. but adding that she is legally protected from deportation by a constitutional principle and a final court ruling. This news comes as US President Donald Trump is set to meet Jordanian King Abdullah on February 11 at the White House, as tensions between the two countries have risen ever since Trump, not once, but thrice, said that both Jordan and Egypt should accept the relocation of Gazans into their territories. And so, with the Middle East trying to bring back a sense of stability amid the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, this move by the Jordanians might be viewed as an olive branch to the new power in the White House.
Still in studio, correspondent Nicole Zedek. The Sparrow blast still resonates with so many people in this country. Such a long time ago, but no justice, and now one small step closer to potentially seeing some kind of justice down the line.
Certainly one small step. This is a woman who has been living not only freely in Jordan, but also speaking out against those atrocities, stating that this is a right of the Palestinian resistance, and that if that's what it takes to go after Israel, then all of this violence and all of this death is justified. This is the platform that she has been allowed to have in Jordan while living freely. And so if there is this small step for her to be extradited, this is something that the United States has been touting for years. Since 2013, she's been on this list, pretty much one of America's most wanted lists, with a bounty on her head as well. So this is a woman that the United States says is incredibly dangerous, and we know that as well. But not only that, if this was a step for the families, it could certainly bring some sort of justice, but we'll have to see what happens.
Well, let's find out exactly if that is the case. We now welcome Arnold Roth, the father of terror victim Malka Roth, joining us from Jerusalem. So, Arnold, thank you so much. We've spoken several times over the years as you fought for justice for your daughter Malki, and you fought for Ahlam Tamimi to be extradited to face justice. She has, of course, been treated like a hero of sorts in Jordan, like a celebrity. It's taken all this time. What is your response to this latest development?
Well, I'm not sure how the latest development has been described here. I don't think there is a latest development, except that there's a flurry of media activity emanating from various sources, mostly Hamas, in Jordan. Of course, what we're all hoping is that this means one way or another that the penny has dropped, that the Jordanians are going to comply with the extradition treaty and hand over this woman who they've sheltered unlawfully since 2012. But the signs are not good. The Speaker of the Jordanian Parliament this morning, made a speech to the Parliament urging everybody to just forget about the issue and that the reports are wrong. And I think he may be right, that the reports are wrong.
And if that is the case, and as you say, it is a developing situation, how could Donald Trump play a role here? We know he meets with the Jordanian king in a week from now in the White House. What is your sense?
That what Trump wants, Trump will get. And if he makes an insistent impression on his guest, King Abdullah of Jordan, the king will have no option but to comply. But at the same time, the same thing would have happened under Biden and under the first Trump and under Obama. The issue here has always been a lack of any visible signs that the Americans are actually making a demand on the Jordanians. And if the Americans aren't making demands on the Jordanians, why in heaven's name is anyone expecting them to comply? So I believe that he will succeed if he insists, but I believe that this will be resolved before then. In other words, if he expects to get Tamimi extradited, he'll probably, or his team will clarify that today or tomorrow or yesterday.
Do you have any direct channels to find out what is happening? Are you being briefed? This is so close to home, obviously.
Well, it's such an important issue that, of course, we're being... Sorry, no one's briefing us and never has at any stage in all the years that we've been trying to get justice and bring our daughter's murderer to prison where she faces, to court where she faces prison and being locked up forever. Look, it's a very, very, very painful story to go into, and I'm not going to go into all the details of it here, but the headline is we've been betrayed by pretty much everybody in the picture and continue to be right up until today. If you imagine that people in any one of the governments involved, United States, Israel or Jordan, is keeping us updated, no.
Well, that is just devastating, especially right now, hoping that there is some kind of a development, some kind of a step closer to some kind of justice. And of course, Arnold, it's the second time you and your family have suffered at the hand of Hamas terrorists. First, obviously, when Malki was killed in the Sparrow blast, and then your son-in-law, Naftali Gordon, killed while fighting in Gaza. That was December of 2023. Your daughter, Pessi, lost a husband and a sister to Hamas more than 2 decades apart. How are they all doing?
We're a strong family, and even though it's hard for me to talk about it, I can say that the grandchildren are being taken care of in a beautiful way, supported. My daughter is being taken care of in a beautiful way and supported, but they're devastated. And just as we were when we lost Malki, no one watching this should ever imagine that there are people manufactured in human race who can just walk through the death of a loved one by hostile people. And in our case, in the case of one we're talking about now, of Ahlam Tamimi, this woman, not literally, but very, very figuratively, has been dancing on Malki's grave all these years. She is notoriously, absolutely unrepentant. She is an inspiration to countless numbers of people whom she urges to go out and do what she did. She says God wanted what she did, and therefore, how could it be wrong? And she doesn't have any political demands. It's all about just kill the Jews.
She was, of course, recorded boasting that she was pleased with the high death toll after the Sparrow attack. One cannot imagine for you having to hear that kind of rhetoric from her as she's treated as a hero in Jordan. We just have 30 seconds left. If you had a message right now to the decision makers involved in making sure that there is some kind of justice here, what is that message you would give right now, if you don't mind?
First part of it would be directed at the American Jewish leaders, and I would say, speak up, because you're disgracing yourselves with your silence. And the second part of it would be to members of the Congress and people involved in lawmaking. Why has this gone on so long? It's a disgrace to all of you, and this woman belongs in an American prison as soon as possible.
Arnold Roth, thank you for speaking to us from Jerusalem. Our hearts are with you. We are watching. Thank you very much for being with us on The Rundown. Beyond devastating. Now we're taking a very quick break. When we get back, our coverage continues. We take you to an Israeli hospital for updates on the condition of some of the freed hostages from Gaza. Stay tuned.
It started on October 7th, but for many, the horror may never end. With homes destroyed, families displaced, hostages missing, soldiers fallen, and a country traumatized. In the first year alone, more than 17,000 Israelis have been wounded, and hundreds of thousands have experienced psychological trauma and need support now. Thankfully, for 112 years, Hadassah hospitals have been on the ground healing. At our expanding Gandel Rehabilitation Center, we're providing critical physical therapy and life-changing mental health services.
Hadassah is a great place.
Today I'm really thankful.
Now, some are back home, living their lives, but many more still need our help. Help your family and friends heal at Hadassah hospitals. Give today.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads, as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back. Our coverage continues. Now, Hamas has been holding meetings in Moscow. A senior official from the terror group, Musa Abu Marzouk, saying earlier on Monday that Maxim Herkin, who was abducted from the Nova Music Festival on the 7th of October, will be released as a priority in the second stage of the deal. He also says hostage Alexander Sasha Truvanov, a dual Russian-Israeli national, will be released imminently. The 28-year-old Truvanov is a civilian and was abducted from his home, but Hamas classifies all male hostages under the age of 50 as members of the Israeli military. He is on the list of the first 33 so-called humanitarian hostages to be released in the first phase of the deal. So far, 13 Israeli hostages have been freed under the deal, along with 5 Thai captives who were released outside of the framework of this phase of the agreement. The most recent release of hostages on Saturday saw Yarden Bibas, Keith Siegel and Ofer Calderon handed over to Israel after 484 days in terror captivity. Now for more, we go to our correspondent Joe Brown. He joins us from Sheba Medical Center here in Israel. So Joe, Yarden Bibas, Ofer Calderon, Arbel Yehud, all being treated at Sheba Medical Center there. One cannot imagine a long road ahead. What are you learning?
Yes, well, as you mentioned, those three are being treated at Sheba Medical Center right now, but just a couple miles to the northwest of here in Tel Aviv's Ichilov Hospital, Keith Siegel is also being treated. And within the last hour or so, we heard from his daughter Shia and his wife Aviva. Shia said to the media that he was being treated largely in solitary confinement, that he was being held in the dark, that he was being starved, that he was being tortured both physically and emotionally, psychologically, and there were times in which he lost hope. But apparently when he arrived back in Israel, he wanted to know what happened to his kibbutz Kfar Aza. He didn't know the extent of the damage, where 10% of the people who lived there were killed or taken captive, including him and his wife Aviva, who also spoke at the press conference. She was born in South Africa and she spoke in English, mentioning President Trump directly, thanking him for his service, as well as speaking in Hebrew to thank Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a lot of media buzz around me, which you can probably see right now. That's because in a couple of minutes or so, family members of Yarden Bibas will be addressing the media, where they will give an update to his physical and psychological well-being. There's been a new report about him that he's lost 15 kilograms of weight in captivity, and he has been struggling, obviously physically, but as well psychologically. His family were abducted on October the 7th. He went into a separate room so that he would be taken captive, and that his wife Shiri and their two very young children, Ariel and Kfir, would hopefully survive, that these terrorists would have pity on this woman with her two young children. But as we saw in those horrific videos which have have been shared around the world, this was not the case, and they were abducted. He was told in captivity that his family was killed by an IDF strike. Israel is yet to verify that, but this is a case that has captivated Israel and the wider world. The fate of Shiri Bibas, of Ariel Bibas, and the youngest hostage, 9-month-old Kfir Bibas, especially the two young children with their bright red hair that have become symbolic. In fact, the Israeli soccer team Beitar Jerusalem will play today in orange t-shirts and orange jerseys, which is unlike them. They usually wear black and yellow. But this is a case that has captivated the whole world, and we will hear more as to what Yarden has been through in a couple of minutes. But one can only fear and one can only worry about what he's had to endure during his 480 plus days in captivity.
One cannot imagine. Correspondent Joe Brown at Sheba Medical Center, thank you for the update. Still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangart, and our correspondent Nicole Zedek. And Eitan, help us understand how Hamas holds all the cards here. As Joe has just said, the nation waiting to hear about the rest of the Bibas family. We know Yarden is safely back home, but Shiri, Ariel, Kfir, no updates at all. And when it comes to the list of who's coming out next, on Friday, Hamas will decide how they give the list, when they give the list, who decides that they get to call the shots on things that are just so important to this Israeli nation.
There are a few remarks about what you said. You have to add to it the psychological theater that they are making and pushing those who were released in the first release that we just watched in the TV from 2 weeks ago till now, and you see the psychological. This is the way, the character of this terror murder organization, and we have to know with whom we are dealing, and they will try to use it till the last minute or second for their benefit. They are using it, and they are covering the fact what they are doing meantime to those people. And Benita, I'm looking about ourselves. This is the main reason. You know with whom you are negotiate. You know that this kind of murderers, this kind of playing with people's life, their families, and all about the Israeli nation, about this release. That is the reason why we have to make most efforts as we can to make all the release of all the hostages, and I'm saying it again, as soon as possible, because this is the only card that Hamas has today, because without it, you know what will be the impact about their, if you call it, guerrilla situation, and also the civil situation inside Gaza. And this is their insurance to be on the ground, to continue. This is the insurance to make some connections, as you just brought the news about releasing of Russia's civilians or the others. What is the only thing is bother me, what we can do to bring them home, and then we will come to finish our duty towards Hamas, military and civilian.
The waiting, the agonizing wait, all part of the psychological terror, no doubt about it. Stay with us, because one of the hostages freed on the weekend was Keith Siegel, as Joe was outlining in his report. The 65-year-old dual Israeli-American citizen was abducted with his wife Aviva from Kibbutz Kfar Aza during the Hamas terror onslaught. She was freed in the first ceasefire deal back in November 2023. Keith was reunited with Aviva and their children in hospital on Saturday. You can see those pictures on your screen right now, after 484 days in terror captivity. Now, Aviva addressed the media in hospital just a short while ago. Let's take a listen.
After 484 days of pain, my beloved husband, Keith, is finally back in my arms. The relief I feel is incredible. Yet, as I hold him close, my thoughts are with the 79 families who are still waiting for their loved ones to return. All of our hearts remain broken until every single one of them is home. When I was released from captivity, I made a promise to Keith, and to myself that I would keep fighting until I see him again. And I did. I fought with everything I had. Today, this reunion was made possible thanks to President Trump. Your brave actions have brought Keith back to us. From my bottom of my heart, thank you. But the journey isn't over, Mr. President. You are our hope for those that are still in captivity. I hope, our hope rests with you to make sure the next stage happens until all the hostages return home. I know you will make sure that this mission continues until every hostage is returned to their family. The world watches, and we believe in your leadership to end the suffering. I want to thank the government of Israel for making the brave decision to bring the hostages home. The hardest part is ahead of us, and I trust you to see this deal through because it's the road of healing for all of us. The people in Israel have been my hope and kept me above water even in the darkest times. I will always be grateful for everything you've done. My family and I have traveled the globe, knocking on every door, sharing our story with everyone who will listen. We never stopped believing Keith will come home. The support from people around the world, the praise, your messages, your strong stand with us kept us going. Now, I ask you to give the same love to the 79 still waiting. They need us. They need you. Until they are all home, our mission isn't completed. Reflecting on my own captivity, the darkness, the fear, the unknown, I remember the hope that kept me alive. Keith went through almost 16 months of nightmare. Keith is finally home, and now we can both start to heal together. While my family is united, I stand here for those that are still separated from their loved ones. We must not rest. We must not turn away. The 79 hostages remaining in Gaza deserve better. Until they are back, our work isn't done. Together we show that even in the darkest times, there is light. Our fight does not end here until they're all home. None of us can truly be at peace. Thank you, everyone.
Aviva Siegel, a short while ago at a hospital here in Israel. What a strong, clear message.
In what is being described as a purge by U.S. media, President Donald Trump's more assertive stance on foreign policy has begun to show with the upending of the United States International Development Agency, where large amounts of humanitarian aid have been frozen. Amid the chaos, U.S. aid's websites were offline over the weekend, as the Trump administration moves to put it under state control.
It's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID. Run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
USAID is an independent government agency that provides humanitarian aid to foreign countries.
Receiving billions a year in funding, the agency's efforts are addressed towards hunger, poverty, and disease. Trump ordered a 90-day freeze to foreign aid last week to give the administration time to review which of the thousands of humanitarian, development, and security programs will keep getting money from the U.S. Billionaire Elon Musk, who is leading the push to reduce the size of the federal government, stated that efforts are in progress to close U.S. aid entirely. Among some exceptions to the freeze was assistance of military aid to Egypt and Israel, the latter receiving around $22 billion in U.S. funding since war erupted on October 7, 2023. But the sudden halt in funding was a surprise to many, including a refugee camp in Syria with a population of around 40,000 Islamic State sympathizers, where the Bluemont NGO was especially hard hit.
Bluemont was responsible for everything, from sanitary, gas, and heating, to food and paperwork and archive. So, we were troubled when Bluemont suspended its activities in this short period.
Following criticism that the aid freeze would threaten lives, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced additional exceptions to the freeze earlier this week, allowing aid that provides life-saving medicine, medical services, food, and shelter to continue.
That report on some of the moves by Donald Trump, including the freezing of funds to USAID, the world's largest single donor of humanitarian aid. Now, as much of the discussion in Washington today and tomorrow will focus on what Gaza might look like the day after the war and who will be in control in the Palestinian enclave, let's take a look at some of the reaction here in Israel. National Unity leader Benny Gantz says the Gaza Strip must not be rebuilt before it is demilitarized, adding that the transition to phase 2 of the hostage deal must include the replacement of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza. The former War Cabinet Minister also telling reporters Israel must ensure that Hamas is not able to access humanitarian aid meant for Gazan civilians. U.S. Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff has suggested that rebuilding Gaza could take 10 to 15 years. Still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Tangod, your thoughts on what it's going to take to rebuild Gaza and what does the day after look like?
Yeah, it's a right subject, because after you see the military achievements by Israel, and we are going now for the reconstruction of Gaza, we must understand that reconstruction Gaza is not only to bring those kind of bulldozers to move all the demolished items from the buildings. It means to create a new civil life, a new structure of civil leadership, and it means to disarm Hamas. And this is the main effort that the Israeli government, especially Bibi Netanyahu now in Washington, has to put his roadmap for such activities. It doesn't mean only who will cross Rafah passages. It means to complete the achievements of the military achievements by we succeed to bring Hamas from being a military of a state to be a guerrilla movement. But we didn't succeed yet to move Hamas and to disarm Hamas and to move Hamas from civil leadership and to disarm Hamas. And this is the main important obstacle now on the discussions that shows Gaza for the coming 10 years, because it will take a long years. And if we are not creating now how it's going, what are the principles, we will miss, and Hamas will stay in Gaza. On the other hand, by being tough and first of all releasing of hostages, and then bringing what we demand from the world of restrictions, it means to bring a new civil organization that will take the leadership in Gaza, and then the other thing, and disarm Hamas, and to move Hamas aside from Gaza, being, let's say, as it is now, the opposite of being the most, the only leadership in Gaza, because there is no other replace for it, and we must create it now.
We'll be waiting to see how Benjamin Netanyahu tries to convince Donald Trump about his plans for Gaza the day after. Stay with us. Another big story. Iran is today slamming President Donald Trump's proposal to relocate Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, warning it would amount to ethnic cleansing. The comments coming after the US president floated the idea to move Gazans to Egypt and Jordan, as we were discussing earlier on in the broadcast. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baqi saying the international community should help Palestinians secure their right to self-determination rather than pushing for other ideas that would be tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Take a listen.
On what they call cleaning out Gaza, if I'm not wrong, we already said that this idea is part of colonial erasure of Gaza Strip and the whole Palestine. And this colonial erasure concept is something that was coined by the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights of the Palestinian people. Again, no third party can decide on the future of Gaza. They have paid extraordinary expense, extraordinary cost for remaining in their land, and if they couldn't uproot them through genocide, through war crimes, through crimes against humanity, for sure they would not let that happen through any political process.
Turning to ties between Syria's new leadership and Turkey, interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa will visit Ankara on Tuesday for an official meeting with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The two are set to discuss bilateral relations and regional developments. Talks will also involve security, the economy and the return of refugees, plus plans for Turkish armed forces to train the new Syrian army. Sharaa and Syrian officials will hold talks with their Turkish counterparts on investments and reconstruction efforts in Syria. This all coming after the spectacular fall of the Assad regime nearly 2 months ago now. Bashar al-Assad and his family are still in Moscow after fleeing during the rebel offensive. Back in this region, the Israeli counter-terror operation in the West Bank continues, with 50 terrorists killed in the past 2 weeks, all part of Operation Iron Wall in Jenin, Tulkarem and Tamum in the northern part of the West Bank. Correspondent Nicole Zedek, a developing situation, a volatile situation. What is the latest?
So as you mentioned, we're on day 14 of this counterterrorism operation inside the northern West Bank right now. 50 terrorists so far eliminated, more than 100 detained. Now the IDF stating that as they've expanded to Tulkarem as well, they've detained more than 50 terrorists just there as well. And so truly going after all of these different hotspots in the northern West Bank, they are going building to building, really scoping through many of these buildings, where they've also uncovered massive caches of weapons, different explosive devices. These are these improvised explosive devices that these different terror factions then use to plant in the roads and detonate when Israeli troops drive over them. And so what we're hearing also from the people inside the West Bank, the mayor of Jenin says that they have not seen an operation like this inside Jenin in pretty much ever, he says, because as we have seen these different counterterrorism operations in the northern West Bank, now we're seeing a shift in the different operations. We have to remember that many of the troops, not only that are operating right now, these are troops that also learn lessons from operating inside Gaza and inside Lebanon, and are now taking those lessons to the West Bank. Just yesterday, we saw something that we had not seen in the northern West Bank. We saw 23 buildings being detonated at one time. Now, this is something that we see inside Gaza, but we had yet to see inside the West Bank truly. And so this is not only a show of force coming from the IDF, but it's also in line with the messaging that we're hearing from Defense Minister Israel Katz. We're not going to likely continue to see these in and out precise operations. Israel Katz says that troops are going to be staying in the northern West Bank to keep an eye on the ongoing terror brewing in this area. And so by them staying there, they're going to be able to watch it. I want to also go after some of the reports that are circulating as well, that the IDF had issued these evacuation orders, specifically in Tubas and Jenin. This is coming from the different governor and the mayor of Tubas and Jenin. IDF sources confirming to I-24 News that is not the case. Evacuation orders have not been issued in these areas yet. This is not something that the IDF has done, unlike the scenes that we've seen in Gaza, so you cannot compare the two. And so these are some of the reports that we've been seeing, but still, that does not mean it is not a volatile situation, as you mentioned, as the troops continue, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime.
Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, your concerns about what's brewing in the West Bank.
I would like to emphasize, besides what was reporting here, that the fact is that when you are using such a force and the arms against it, it means what is the threat that is coming from, especially the north part of the West Bank. And what was going up there is really a danger for the living of more than 400,000 Israelis that are living next by. And we cannot allow ourselves that in this region will continue to grow such a main threats. And it's based on the fact that a lot of smuggling arms, money, and instructed how to build their forces are coming from Jordan, crossing inside. And what does it mean now? That Israel decided that the IDF should use a lot of strong power, but specifically against those targets. It means while you are active inside these places, you get more intelligence. And as you get more intelligence, you have to react and to destroy and to target those areas, because if not, tomorrow we will find ourselves in such scenarios that will remind us the 7th of October. It's not the beginning, it is in the middle, but it's not the end. I think that we will have to see in the coming weeks a lot of activities. If you see, it's coming from Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarem, and it's going eastern area towards Tubas and other kind of villages. What growth is there is a small military that we have to cut its head as soon as possible.
30 seconds left. Palestinian security prisoners, some of them released in the current deal from Israeli jails, have gone straight to the West Bank. Is that a concern? 30 seconds.
We have no other alternative. The alternative, we are coming back to the beginning of this report of news. We have to release hostages. It's a very painful price. We have to put a very close intelligence on these people inside the West Bank and to use all the tools that we have to stop them in the minute we are realized that their dirty hands are dealing again with terrorists.
Because what happened on the 7th of October can never, ever happen again. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, correspondent Nicole Zedek, thank you both so much for being here in studio. And that is a wrap for the Rundown for today. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for watching. This is I-24 News.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
אחי, איזה חיוך! איזה חיוך!
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I-24 News.
Welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week we'll focus on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora as the global Jewish community. And we start our top 5 items in the Jewish world presented by Nicole Zedek. Hello, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Ireland's Jewish leaders are criticizing President Michael Higgins for his, quote, inappropriate comments about Israel's war with Hamas during the country's Holocaust Memorial Day commemorations. Protesters were forcibly removed after turning their back on Higgins, who drew comparisons between the Holocaust and the war in Gaza. Prior to the commemorations, Irish Jews had already urged Higgins to remain apolitical out of respect to the victims of the Holocaust. A Polish woman returned around 1,000 items belonging to Jewish people from Auschwitz. The items include Judaica, children's toys, clothes, watches, and Torah scrolls, and were taken from the concentration camp by the woman's father, who worked as a cleaner at Auschwitz. The artifacts will now be displayed by the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum. An inquiry by the Belgian government has found that the Belgian National Railway Company should not pay compensation to the descendants of Jews who were transported on its train tracks to concentration camps. The inquiry said the organization should apologize for its role in the mass deportations, but place the, quote, collective responsibility of the trains on the complacent Belgian government and people. Jewish groups are slamming the ruling. A Jewish man has been jailed for 2.5 years for planning to attack a synagogue. Matthew Maurer was jailed alongside his accomplice, Christopher Brown, in a decision that's divided New York's Jewish community. Many feeling Brown took advantage of Maurer, who has PTSD and autism. Maurer has since undergone rehabilitation and apologized for his role in the plot. And finally, 14 people have been inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Most notable, NBA legend and Orthodox Jewish convert Amar'e Stoudemire, iconic Argentinian soccer commentator Andres Cantor, and 1984 Olympic judo medalist Robert Berland are all on the list. The International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame has inducted more than 500 people from more than 30 countries since 1979. And those are all of the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
Last week, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th American president, with his inauguration featuring a speech by Yeshiva University President Rabbi Ari Berman. And his inauguration parade highlighted the plight of the Israeli hostages in captivity in Gaza, including some American Israelis. But according to most exit polls, American Jews voted overwhelmingly for his opponent, Kamala Harris. His vote share among the Jewish community increased from his showing in 2020. But now many American Jews are wondering what the next 4 years has in store. Joining me in studio now to talk about these issues and more is Ron Campias, the former Washington bureau chief for the Jewish Telegraphic Agency and a veteran journalist who has spent decades covering the Jewish world. Hello, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot going on. To be a journalist for so many years, these are definitely times I think we haven't seen in American and Israeli history combining at the same time. So explain your views as a journalist, what direction you think this could go, especially as we saw what Elon Musk did, and he obviously came under a lot of criticism. Your thoughts on all that?
I think, you know, the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration, in terms of the Jewish community, Jewish voters, Jewish observers, they're going to be celebrating the release of the hostages, frankly. I think that was... they're going to see that. Obviously, it was a joint operation between the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration, but it's going to be seen with some justification as Trump's victory. He said there would be hell to pay. I think that here in Israel, the people I've spoken to say that was translated more as something that Netanyahu had to listen to. And in any case, there are 7 hostages out. There are another 25 that could come out in the next few weeks, and that's what people are going to focus on. Longer term, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. The Musk appointment, his influence in the administration, what that means, given the apparent Nazi salute, and as well as his backing for AfD, a party with roots in among neo-Nazis, that is going to disturb a lot of people. To what degree does President Trump heed that information? To what degree does he internalize it? To what degree does he reject it? I think that's going to be a preoccupation of the Jewish community going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, what about the ADL's response? Kind of surprising. They weren't completely calling crying foul. We know that Musk has been here, and people close to him say this is not the case. So your response to ADL's response?
You know, I think ADL has to be cautious. They're dealing with a very powerful man in Elon Musk. They're dealing with a new administration. I think that a lot of people I saw on social media had what would have been more the traditional ADL response, which is that looked exactly like a Nazi salute. Maybe you didn't intend it as a Nazi salute, but you need to explain to us what went on there. And Musk has kept on trolling. He hasn't really explained what was happening when he made that salute. And he hasn't bothered to address, I think, a lot of the legitimate Jewish concerns, because a lot of other Jewish organizations in the States, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, were very, very concerned by it. No, I don't know if anybody actually thinks that Musk himself is a Nazi or internalizes Nazi beliefs, but he is somebody who likes attention, obviously.
And it's not sensitive. I mean, even if it wasn't that, it's insensitive.
It's insensitive, and it was followed up by his comments at a conference recently that the Germans have had enough of remembering. It's time for them to forget, or remarks to that effect. Nobody's saying, I don't think there's a legitimate Jewish scholar or Jewish organizations that's saying that the visits of the great-grandfathers should be visited on the great-grandchildren, but they should definitely be aware of what went on in the past, just like any country that has, on whose name crimes have been committed, should be aware of what went on in the past.
So overall, Jews in the United States, what do you think? I mean, is there a hope, a trepidation? I mean, we know generally more Jews are vote left, but this is very complicated at times, different than what we've seen throughout American history.
Like I said, I think they're just in wait-and-see mode, and they're like a little worried about the signs that have come forward. I think that, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of rejoicing because of the release of the hostages. But then you have you have the isolationist element of Trump's advisors coming through in terms of a senior official who was associated with the Quincy Institute, which was an organization that preaches isolationism, preaches like ramping down the confrontation with Iran. I think that the organizations that are more conservative, more hawkish, that hoped Trump would be more confrontational with Iran, they're kind of waiting and seeing now. They don't know whether that's going to play out.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Ram Kampias, thank you for your assessment, as always. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
This week, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the world commemorates the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. This after 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. A European Union delegation to Israel paid tribute to the survivors at a special Holocaust event in Herzliya in conjunction with Yad Vashem. Here's my report with survivors who are lighting up the path of remembrance.
Profound honor for me to join you today at Beit Juliana as we mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day and commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau.
An emotional celebration of survivors mixed with a painful reminder of the horrors of the Holocaust.
You're living witnesses to history and the source of hope for all of us. Your voices urge us to ensure that never again is not just a pledge, but a reality.
The European Union delegation to Israel and Yad Vashem converged at Herzliya's Bet Juliana Assisted Living Center, home to several Holocaust survivors.
My parents, they gave me to a non-Jewish family to keep me, and they tried to escape to Swiss, and when they should come back, they will pick me up, but they didn't came back. I was 1 year, and when the war finished, I was 4 years.
My dad was originally a journalist who in 1933 wrote against the Nazis. They looked for him immediately, and his neighbor told him, "Leave quickly and take your suitcase." They managed to get on the last truck that brought soldiers from the border, and they arrived in Brussels, where I was born.
The reality of war coming full circle literally landed on Bet Juliana's doorstep on Yom Kippur. Hezbollah fired a drone into Israel that hit Rachel Fish's apartment, a reminder of the fragility of life.
After things started heating up for Jews, my mom's best friend contacted her and said, "You know, we are not gonna forget you." Her husband's partner in Bruges agreed to hide us, which was dangerous to his family and to us. We lived in the attic of their home.
The crowd was also entranced by the film documenting the miraculous journey of Yaakov Wexler Waskenel. Yaakov's Jewish parents made the most difficult choice, one that saved their son's life and soul.
I know for sure that on March the 25th, 1943, my Jewish mother brought me to the window of my Polish mother's house. And I was around 8 days old. I thought they were my real parents until I was 49 years old. They were always my beloved parents. Stopping her tears, my mother told me everything. She simply said that I was a child of Jewish parents. I didn't imagine it was to such an extent.
Yaakov committed his life to the church, becoming a priest on his own volition. But it's something he later found out fulfilled the wishes of his dying mother, who saved her son by martyring herself.
Anyway, it was a deep pain when my mother told me about the wishes of my Jewish mother. Therefore, I felt very close to him, to Jesus. I felt a deep gratitude for being Jewish. It rose to life like a volcano, erupted like a volcano with all its might. But the fact that I'm Jewish was something big.
So big that Yaakov made Aliyah to Israel, found relatives he didn't know existed, and devoted himself to rediscovering his Jewish roots and beyond.
In 2009, I came to Israel, not as a new Jewish immigrant, because I was a priest. I found work at Yad Vashem, where I worked for 13 years until last year when I retired.
At the tender age of 76, Yaakov officially became a man, having his bar mitzvah with Israel's chief Rabbi Lau. And his Polish adoptive parents, Amelia and Piotr Waskanel, were recognized as righteous among the nations. A glimmer of hope that there is humanity even in the darkest of times.
We Europeans consider it a sacred duty to condemn and repudiate the factories of death that the Nazis and their local collaborators set up in our continent and beyond, with the sole goal to annihilate every single Jew they could find.
Do you feel hope for the future for the Jewish people and for Israel?
There are days that I don't have hope, and then a few days later I have hope again. We passed so many things. I think we will survive. We have this country, we didn't got it for nothing. They said always in Europe, go to your country. That means go back to Israel. So we are here, we stay here, and I don't want to go to any other country.
And I believe that God is with us. This is the God of Israel. I want there to be peace, not just in Israel, but across the whole world.
Harrowing stories indeed, and there is a very real possibility that this could happen again. A study from the Conference of Jewish Material Claims has shown that the majority of adults around the world believe that a genocide against the Jewish people could happen again. Joining us now from Toronto is Honorary Professor Erwin Kotler, the International Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good speaking with you.
So what do we make? We know that the anti-Semitism has only been rising globally in the wake of October 7th, not that it wasn't there before. So we're now seeing this in Canada in so many places you wouldn't even think about, not just large cities. What is the tide and how are Jews feeling being there?
Well, you know, at the end of 2022, when I was in the special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, I reported then that what we were witnessing was a mainstreaming, normalizing, legitimation of anti-Semitism in the political culture, the popular culture, entertainment, sports, and in particular, the campus culture. But most importantly, with an absence of outrage, with indifference and inaction in the face of that. And I think that was the backdrop to what happened post-October 7th. The embers were already burning before that. Then with October 7th, the horrific, unspeakable mass atrocities perpetrated not only by a terrorist organization, Hamas, but by an anti-Semitic genocidal terrorist organization. Not because I say so, but because they've said so in their founding charter, and since then, post-October 7th, said they would commit such atrocities again and again and again. One would have thought that this would have resulted in a uniform condemnation of anti-Semitism, in action against anti-Semitism. On the contrary, what we've seen has been a denial even that the atrocities have taken place. And what we've seen in Canada, for example, has been in the public squares, marches, support for such mass atrocities, justification of them, in fact, even celebration and glorification of them. And that's why, at this point, I think it has to be realized, I said this in a meeting with our Canadian Prime Minister not too long ago, that this anti-Semitism is not just threatening to Jews. It's toxic to democracies. It's an assault on our fundamental freedoms and on our, indeed, even national security. And as we've learned only too painfully and too well, that while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews.
Yeah, and also a new study showed that a staggering number of adults didn't even know about the Holocaust. This includes half of young people, even in France, which is so insane to think about when so much energy is being put on Holocaust education. But is this kind of part and parcel of what we're seeing about the diluting of history and the experience of the Jewish people?
Yes, we had a similar report here in Canada, but with similar data that's repeated itself. That's why we've sought to make the teaching of the Holocaust and education be the Holocaust mandatory in high schools and the like. But it's not just about Holocaust education. We need education regarding anti-Semitism. You know, we're speaking now on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is, of course, the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the death camp Auschwitz, the worst extermination camp of the 20th century. Now, 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism itself did not die in Auschwitz. It remains the bloody canary in the mineshaft of global evil today. And that is why, again, as I said in meeting with political leaders here in Canada, at this point, what we need are not just statements of condemnation. We need action. We need effective enforcement of the laws, etc.
So what kind of actions, if any, are being taken? Because like I said earlier, we are seeing violence like in Winnipeg, even as far as, you know, the western coast of Canada. Canada is a very, very big place with a lot of provinces. Are we seeing it everywhere in all the communities throughout Canada?
We're seeing it throughout Canada. We've had a dramatic rise in hate crimes targeting Jews and incendiary hate speech. Jews are 1% of the population of Canada, yet they are the targets of over 70% of religiously motivated hate crimes. And with regard to incendiary hate speech, here too, there is more hate speech targeting Jews than against any other and all other minorities combined. And that is why we need effective action, not just declarations from the government, not just performative tweets and the like, but in fact, when you have these demonstrations, they're not just pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Peaceful protest pro-Palestinian is fine. What we're seeing in the public squares, in the streets of Montreal and Toronto and Winnipeg, what we're seeing are pro-Hamas demonstrations, pro-Iran demonstrations. And each time these demonstrations take place, I can tell you as a former Minister of Justice, etc., that a half a dozen crimes under the criminal code are being committed, whether we talk about unlawful assembly, we talk about public incitement to hatred, etc. So what we need is effective enforcement of the laws. And what I recommended that the country do is have a national forum on anti-Semitism of an urgent character, bringing together federal, provincial, municipal governments, because they work in silos, bringing together prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and the like, so that we can not only have an action plan, but in fact implement it. We do have plans, they're not yet being implemented.
Wow. Well, if there's anyone who's the right person to push it through, it is you. Thank you very much. Honorable Professor Irwin Cotler, the International Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, as well as former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Not at all. Good speaking with you.
Jews make up less than 2.5% of the American population, but when it comes to business acumen, Jews are often viewed as punching above their weight, which may have led to Jewish business owners being left out of America's federal minority business community. Here's more from I-24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim reporting that oversight has been remedied.
Jews are a minority. It seems like such an obvious statement, but Jews have not been classified as such when it comes to federal business benefits. That changed earlier this month when the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce signed a landmark memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Department of Commerce and its Minority Business Development Agency to include Jewish business owners among those minorities eligible for government contracts, loans, grants, and participation in educational and advancement initiatives.
There's endless hundreds and hundreds of different programs that every single Jewish business is going to benefit from. This is very unique because as the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, we focus on helping people in different industries, whether it's health, medical, real estate, expos, conferences, job placements, trainings. This is something that impacts everyone, every single business in the Jewish world in all 50 states.
Duvi Honig, the founder and CEO of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, told us that he's been building partnerships with other minority communities for years, and the MOU signed with the Commerce Department is a direct result of those relationships.
So I advocated for it a long time. I said, we need the Department of Commerce to work from the bottom up, not the top down. That's the only way we'll be able to help the American economy. And I brought 30 chambers, African American, Hispanic, diversified, 5 boroughs, West Coast, East Coast, and we had 30 top chambers, and I had over here National Roundtable in this room. So by being able to be inclusive for everyone, empower everyone, we were able to say, hey, what about me? And that was the approach that we were successful with, because we really mean it.
An influential politician from a Jew-heavy New Jersey district told us the impact in his community could be enormous.
Lakewood Township being the largest Jewish community in all of New Jersey, we have 10,000 students in the college there. Only a very small portion, like 5%, go in to become rabbinical teachers or rabbis. The other 95% go into business, entrepreneurship. They become CPAs, they become doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs as such. This will encourage them to stay in New Jersey, develop businesses, and qualify for dollars and cents, which is so important.
But one question is why? Why did it take so long for the federal government to make this happen?
It's the obvious answer, which is we're thought of because of the success of many people in our community. They forget about the people that don't always have the same advantages or talents, and so we get labeled, in the same way we get labeled, and unfortunately in many ways, in anti-Semitic ways, we get labeled as a group that doesn't need help.
While the memorandum was signed in the final days of the Biden administration, the Trump admin's incoming Deputy Commerce Secretary attended, showing a commitment to seeing the initiative through. The Minority Business Development Agency is now working on a new application to include Jewish-owned businesses for qualification as minority business enterprises, which will open the door to the wide range of the government benefits available. Reporting here from the Commerce Department in Washington, Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
Thank you all so much for watching Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. Sure hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but until then, shalom from Tel Aviv.